Hello, everyone, and welcome to Musical Mondays. Today, I'm super excited because we are learning about one of my favorite instruments, one that I kind of wish I still played.
The viola, of course, the famous middle child of the orchestra. It's a little bit lower than the violin and a little bit higher than the cello.
Yeah, I like it because it's you can like dig into it a little bit more
Mhm.
than the violin. And actually, when I tried to go back to the violin after playing the viola for several years, all I would get was a scratching sound because I was so excited to like dig in and have like just like you just it's a bigger instrument and you just have a little more
Absolutely.
to do with it. And we're meeting two incredible violas today, so we're really excited and we're gonna get right into it. So, Chloe, you want to introduce our first
Sure.
guest?
Yes, our first guest today is Liz Pryor. She's the principal violist of the Santa Rosa Symphony.
So, hi, Liz. Thank you so much for joining us today and to tell us a little bit about the viola and all the great music written for an instrument that I played all throughout high school and so deeply love. So, I thought we could just start by asking you how you got started on the viola.
Um, well, I started on the violin when I was about five. And basically, what happened was I was a 5-year-old living in Madison, Wisconsin when I was a small child. And apparently, I saw an ad for the Suzuki Music School on television. And while I was probably watching Sesame Street or something, and then I told my parents that I really wanted to play the violin, and they found out about the school and put me in, and I played violin all the way up to the age of 14. And when I was 14, I don't know, I kind of wasn't really, the violin wasn't like happening for me. I don't know why, I just kind of plateaued. And my teacher said that they desperately needed violists in the orchestra, and there were people, they had like third violins. They had a section called the third violins that would play the part. And he said he really thought I needed to try something different, and he thought my hands had the right shape or something. So I was just sort of open to try something new. And the minute I heard the viola and I played the viola, it just totally resonated with me. And I feel like sometimes an instrument finds you, it finds, you connect with it on a certain level. And it's always, I think, been more who I am. I'm not a violinist, I'm a violist. And so that's kind of how it started. Um, and from then on, I improved so rapidly. I went from just plateauing as a violinist to just being so excited about the viola, and then just getting a lot more success at that age. Around 16, it just took off, and then I knew I'm going to study music and make that my life. So
That's so amazing. So you mentioned you started on the violin. How is that different than the viola? Some of our listeners might not know the difference between the two instruments.
yes, well, I actually have a violin here as well. I should have taken it out, but anyway, this is the viola. It's hard to tell the difference, but it's much bigger, actually much bigger than a violin,
Mhm.
and it's much deeper, the sound. So you have, the violin has an E string, which would sound like this. That's the highest string, but we only have an A string as the highest string. And then our lowest string is a C, which has a much deeper resonant sound. The violin's lowest string is a G, but ours is a. So that's how the viola is just a fifth lower than the violin. But because the instrument is bigger, it has a more deeper and resonant sound than violin.
So what is the viola's role in the orchestra? You mentioned it's a third violin section in some ways, but in other ways it's very important.
It is. It is. I feel like the viola always has kind of like the important harmony sort of part of the harmony structure. The violin always seems to have the higher, like the tune, the higher line. Of course, cellos and bass have like the bass part of a chord. But I always say that the violas so often have the most interesting lines, because we actually are the ones that like move the harmony. If it's the major third or the minor third, is where often the violas are given that harmony. And especially if you play Wagner, for me, I think Wagner was especially good to the violas. I mean, we have a lot of notes, but it's very rich, and it has some of the most interesting writing, I think, in the viola section in Wagner's operas. That's why I love playing Wagner opera. It's so satisfying.
Well,
And
you
I
already, oh, go ahead.
say that the viola is like the middle of a sandwich. You have the outside of the sandwich and the other two sides of the sandwich, but in the middle is the interesting, flavors. I always say that's what the viola gets. We get the interesting parts in the middle.
That's a great description of the viola. I love that.
So Liz, we saw that you brought out the violin now. So let's get a comparison because, in the concert hall, if you're, kind of in the middle of the audience, it is a little harder to see the size comparison between the two, but let's see them side by side here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot smaller, and you can see the length. It's also shorter. And then the strings, here I'll play the viola strings. That's the viola. This is the violin. I'll start from the lowest string as well. The sound of the violin. This is the sound of the viola. You can hear that it's much more resonant than the violin. At least it has a much deeper sound. So
Love it.
Yeah. I have a very similar story to you that I played violin from like, I don't know, age 7 to like 16. And it wasn't until like my junior year in high school that I finally decided to make the switch. And the moment I did, I was like, oh, like if I had switched just a few years earlier, like that would have been my instrument. But at that point, I was already so much further ahead on piano that I just kind of was off in that direction. But viola was just like, that was my, I don't know, that was like that instrument for me. And I think for a lot of composers and conductors in history, they've been violists. And I think there's something about how the sound of the viola is like, it provides such an underpinning for the warmth of the string section, because you can both go very high like the violin, but also provide kind of those undertones.
Yeah, and so I think one of the really famous composers or earlier composers was Mozart. I mean, he absolutely loved the viola, and he used to play viola when he played in groups, in quartets and stuff. And then he wrote all of these incredible viola quintets, which means 2 violas when you say viola quintet. And so he wrote some of the most interesting parts in the viola quintets.
Yeah.
So I feel really pleased we have that,
Do you have an all-time favorite piece to play in orchestra?
I must say, I absolutely love playing Prokofiev. I love, and I have one of my favorite, or maybe 2 of my favorite Prokofiev ballets are Romeo and Juliet and Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's my favorite. I really love Prokofiev.
I really like, especially in Romeo and Juliet, how you can hear the different characters in the piece, and maybe to those of you listening at home, Romeo and Juliet by Prokofiev actually laid down a lot of the base work for West Side Story and a lot of other great, more modern pieces of music for orchestra. Obviously the same themes apply between Romeo and Juliet and West Side Story, both literary, but then also musically. Bernstein borrows some, and I think that's so interesting. Prokofiev laid so much groundwork for plots and leitmotifs and all these different concepts that he was so ahead of his time.
Yeah. I mean, it must be great when you have a composer like Prokofiev that, to me, really understands the characters and the sounds of the instruments and what they can produce. And so, a viola solo for Prokofiev isn't just like, oh, I should give the viola as a solo, but there's a clear underpinning to the sound and the character he wants. So I imagine that makes a big difference when you're performing a composer.
Yes, he definitely knows how to use what the viola can bring, just in a kind of a, sometimes I think the viola is given like the romantic lines or the warm, but sometimes it is given the ominous kind of, an ominous sort of scary kind of sound sometimes too. So, that's what I think is so cool about the viola. So I made this CD, which I call Viola Romance, but initially I was going to call it Versatile Viola, because I think the viola is very versatile. Because we can play cello repertoire, violin repertoire, bassoon repertoire, French horn repertoire, we can clarinet repertoire, we can play a lot of different ranges.
Wow. So one last question before we go. Other than playing viola and being an amazing classical musician, what do you do with your spare time? What do you do for fun?
Well, I've had a lot more spare time now, that's for sure, and I've actually really been enjoying it because I hike a lot. I walk as much as I can every day. I try to do really long hikes, discover new places in San Francisco and in the Bay Area. I love going up the mountains. I've been baking. I've actually been helping someone compose. I've been composing some music and helping write the orchestration for a song. So I've been doing that. That's been keeping me really busy. And then sometimes I bake bread, and I spend a lot of time talking to my friends far away. That's actually taken a lot of my time because I have a lot of international family all over the world. So I actually try to catch up with a lot of them. So that's kind of, yeah, I've been keeping busy somehow, reading a lot of books. So.
Yeah, sounds about the same here.
Sounds about the same, yeah. Before we finish up, Liz, we have a couple wonderful performances of yours, so everyone can get a sense for just the amazing sounds that viola can make. So could you introduce the first performance we'll be seeing?
Yes, the first one is a piece by Rachmaninoff, which I'm sure many different instruments play. It's called Vocalise, and in this version, it's viola and piano, and I'm playing it with Kimri Isenko, who's in the Santa Rosa Symphony.
Great.
And
Let's check it out then. It's one of my very favorite pieces.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's beautiful. Song without words. then the other piece is by Shostakovich, which is actually a very unusual style. It's actually very romantic, and it's called The Gadfly. And I think it was written as partly a soundtrack to something, to a movie. I'm not really sure the history of it, but it's also a very haunting, beautiful tune. And that's also with Kimmy as well.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, we'll check that out. Well, that was just so fantastic to hear the amazing sounds of the viola in both those pieces. Liz, thank you so much for sharing that with us and for taking some time to talk to us about this wonderful instrument today.
Thank you very much for having me. Enjoyed it.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it?
That was super fun. Wasn't it amazing how she showed us the difference between the viola and the violin and what an incredible size difference there are between the two instruments?
Yeah, and I love the musical selection she shared with us. They're
Absolutely.
such beautiful pieces for the viola. And now I'm really excited to introduce you to another violist, a good friend of mine. His name's Devin Moore. He actually played in the Pittsburgh Youth Symphony Orchestra when I was the music director there, and he's now a student at the very famous Juilliard School, one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. And I had a chance to catch up with him this week, and really excited to introduce you to him and let you hear a little bit of his playing as well. Well, Devin, it's so great to see you. It's been, okay, maybe I don't want to think how many years it's been. What has it been, 4?
Yeah, it's almost 4 years now.
Oh my goodness, since we were together with the Pittsburgh Youth Symphony Orchestra. And I remember, I mean, you know, of course you were one of our star players, but I also was like particularly fond of you because you made the switch from violin to viola while I was a director, and I did the same thing in youth orchestra in high school as I switched from violin to viola. So it was wonderful to be able to work with you, and so many great memories. But catch me up on what's happened for you since you finished up high school in Pittsburgh. Where have you been now?
Sure. Well, after I graduated, I'd started studying with Mahi Lin in the Pittsburgh Symphony when I switched to viola officially around my senior year. So I was working really hard with her to sound like a violist and not like a violinist trying to play viola. So auditions were definitely stressful the first time around because I was sort of new to the instrument, and also, you know, no one in my immediate family is a musician, so sort of was just throwing myself out there. So I decided to go to Manhattan School of Music to study with Sam Rhodes for 2 years. I had an amazing time there. I was an RA. I did a lot with student council, so I did a lot outside of school. And I was very happy to get really good training. I was able to play solo with the Manhattan School of Music Symphony my sophomore year. They did Harold in Italy, which was a really amazing experience, getting to play that piece with orchestra. And the conductor was Leonard Slatkin. So also getting to work with Leonard Slatkin one-on-one is pretty incredible. So then after my sophomore year, I decided to audition to transfer to Juilliard to continue studying with my teacher. One of the main reasons I wanted to do that was because I had gone to the Aspen Music Festival right after my freshman year, and I did a lot of chamber music there. And I had sort of formed a New York quartet, and all 3 of the other members were at Juilliard. And we really were playing well together, and they were like, well, maybe you should try and transfer here, so then we'd actually be able to do the program that Juilliard offers and, you know, potentially stay together. So that was one of the driving forces, and it ended up working out really well. So I was able to, I just finished my first year at Juilliard. I'm a hybrid transfer junior first year student, whatever you want to call it. But I love the school so much so far. I try to be as involved as I was at MSM outside of music or artistic endeavors. I am one of the representatives on the inaugural Juilliard Student Congress, which is a body of students that represent all the different divisions in student life as well. We've been a lot, you know, working closely with administration to sort of make sure that Juilliard student voice is at the front of what we're doing. So that's been really exciting. I'm really pleased to have gotten the Kovner Fellowship for next year, which still haven't been able to process that. But yeah, I'm really honored to be able to accept that fellowship as well. And now I've been doing a few projects in quarantine. The other violists in my year and I decided that we wanted to, you know, do some sort of project with all 10 of us, right? So we're really close friends anyway. So I did an arrangement of the Barbara Adagio for strings for 10 violas, and we decided to partner with AmeriCares, which is a nonprofit organization that is like specifically a disaster relief fund. And so we partnered with them, and they're going to be posting our video on their social media in, I think, 2 days, actually, which will be exciting. So that's sort of what I've been doing. In terms of the future, I'm excited to start my senior year at Juilliard, even though it's going to be pretty unorthodox. In November, hopefully, I'll be doing the Cecil Aronovitz competition in Birmingham, in England, with a few of my colleagues as well. So that'll be my first like international competition. So we'll see. I'm excited to sort of have you start reaching out and taking auditions and networking outside of conservatory. So it's too exciting.
Yeah. Well, that was just wonderful to see and so much fun, wasn't it, Chloe?
Super fun. I really enjoyed learning about the viola. It's such an incredible instrument, and it too often gets overlooked by a lot of people when they're learning about the orchestra, and we just absolutely love it, and think you do too.
Yeah. And we have another instrument to really put the spotlight on next week that isn't like, that is an instrument that really deserves to be like center stage, but they don't get to sit center stage in the orchestra. So we're going to spend a lot of time looking at them. What instrument is that?
We're learning about the double bass, the giant string instrument in the orchestra.
Oh yeah, you guys are not going to want to miss that. It is so cool to talk to bass players and just see how hard they have to work, because on the violin, if the space between your two fingers is like is just like that, then on the bass it's like that much wider in between to get to every note. Mm-hmm. So it's just remarkable to watch them play.
And amazing to watch them move their instruments around too.
I was gonna say, you must like that, because it's like moving this harp around. You finally can talk to someone who can appreciate what it's like to move this around. So,
yeah.
Well, anyways, we'll see you guys next week for Musical Mondays. Thanks for joining us.